Hello and welcome everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto Became the Guardian of All Creation, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Uzumaki Naruto was currently in a crisis, which Namikaze was unaware of. Yes, this 3-year-old boy with short, spiky blonde hair, ocean blue eyes, and naturally tan skin marred only by 3 whisker-like birthmarks was in serious trouble. The old man had warned him not to go outside on his birthday, October 10th, but he was too intrigued by the festival. So, using his 3-year-old logic, he left the security of his lonely apartment to pursue his curiosity. Yes, he had an apartment at the age of 3, which was almost unheard of among the ninja population. It wasn't because he was a prodigy, but because the orphanage refused to care for him. So, of course, a 3-year-old would want to go see why everyone was having so much fun, right? The Sandame was naive to think he'd stay inside. He'd left his apartment and walked down the main road, completely oblivious to the glares and malicious chuckling that trailed him, staring in wide-eyed awe at all the pretty colors of the festival in the way that only a child could. Of course, no one seemed to think he was a child. He was the Kyuubi incarnate, the 9-tailed demon fox who had attacked their village just 3 years before. The 3 fine whisker-like marks on his cheeks seemed to reinforce their erroneous belief that he was out to get them all, come hell or high water. Of course, human stupidity is limitless, so instead of being smart and training the Kyuubi to become a human weapon, they repeatedly attacked the boy. Viciously, there was even a spork, a chipped kitchen sink, and a pair of high-heel shoes. But, due to the nature of a child's mind, he didn't seem to remember it ever happening. However, that could be the memory erasure technique that the Hokage kept asking Yamanaka clan members to use on him in the hope that the child will live a normal life. You'd think that after having to erase a traumatic event for the 3rd time in a week, he'd realize he wasn't going to be normal. He believed in what he was doing because there were no lasting wounds or scars, mental or physical. The boy had made it to the heart of the festival by this point. He was completely unaware of how everyone quieted down when they saw him, stopping their joyful laughter and playing the games to stare at him with hatred. Finally, one brave villager broke the awkward silence with the cry, "The demon has arrived. Now we can finish what the Yondaime began." Following traditional mob mentality, 68.2% of the villagers nodded in unison and chased the boy, who thought it was a game. That notion quickly faded as the pointy objects began to rain down on him as he ran, triggering his adrenaline. Most of the hail of weapons had missed, with only 1 or 2 grazing their prey, according to the laws of idiotic, bloodthirsty mobs. The prey in question was outrunning fully grown humans as fast as his 3-year-old legs could carry him. Of course, this was doomed to fail, and he was apprehended less than a minute later. So there he was, in a burlap sack being dragged through what he assumed was a forest. The man left, and Naruto struggled to get out of the sack, saying, "You should just die out here, demon, and save our village from the disgrace of your blood on our soil." He looked around where he was left after succeeding, thanks to the drunken craftsmanship on the knot at the top. His mind ached slightly, and if he'd known what it was or why it was happening, he'd have called it déjà vu. He was surrounded by tall trees, the green canopy blocking out most of the light and casting a creepy light on the forest floor. He began to wander around, mostly in childlike wonder, and came across a cave. Not just any cave, but one with a swarm of pretty light orbs swirling around the entrance that completely enchanted the child. The lights were quite soothing, and he fell asleep at the cave mouth after failing to capture one of those lovely lights. Unbeknownst to him, a single red eye was watching him from within the cave, perplexed as to why the child's parents hadn't come looking for him. In the twilight gloom, the shadowy figure stepped out, too vague to describe, and looked around for a possible search party. It came across the burlap sack after about 3 hours of searching and wondering how the hell it missed something like that on its search. Noticing a few blonde strands of hair caught in it, as well as a trail leading back to the nearby village, it deduced that the child had been kidnapped and left out here to die. With parental instincts on high alert, the figure gently scooped up the small child, nearly dropping it when they realized how light it was, far too light to be normal. It was taken aback by the baggy orange jumpsuit. By now, the child should have died of malnutrition, and he was just prancing around like nothing was wrong a few hours ago, trying to catch the pretty lights, as he called them. This child was certainly intriguing. The figure decided that since it had nothing else to do while here, it might as well look after the boy. Who can say? It could simply be the action that brings salvation. The following day, For the boy, waking up in a cave was an unusual sensation. The cold, hard floor triggered something in him, gradually revealing hidden memories, but he ignored it for the time being. He looked around, expecting to see Hokage Jiji, and was surprised to find himself in a cave rather than his apartment or a hospital. Not your typical dank, creepy, moldy cave. This was a stylish cave, with cushions for chairs and a few purple rugs scattered about. Up against the cave's back wall was a neatly made bed that appeared to have been slept in recently. There were even a few transparent stalactites dripping crystal clear water into bowls perched beneath them. He collapsed again after a brief look around. The locked memories had finally eluded a few dozen different memory techniques and flooded his mind in a cacophony of pseudo-sensation. Naruto awoke around noon and tried to sort through the new memories he had gained. He was surprised because he had no recollection of these events previously, and was that a plastic spork being driven into his eye? How did he have two working eyes after impaling one on a spork? After concluding that the memory had to be a dream, the child realized he wasn't alone in the cave. He did rather poorly considering he only realized it when a soft hand was placed on his shoulder. He curled up into a fetal position to protect himself, using instincts he didn't even know he had. His conscious mind was wondering from where, and his subconscious was turning it off and telling it to stop talking, claiming seniority and experience. He slowly uncurled after a few moments of suspenseful silence, peering through a gap in his fingers to see who had touched him. Despite her outlandish attire, she was a rather attractive woman. The first thing that struck him was her eyes, or more specifically, one of her eyes, as her other was hidden behind her hair. It was a bright red, and the flickers of emotion running through it made her appear older than she was. Her black hair was tied back in a knot with 4 thin braids hanging down her back, and her bangs were parted over her exposed right eye, the hair falling to rest against the side of her chin. Her lips were a strange purple shade of lipstick, which looked natural against her alabaster skin and went well with the things she was doing. Her cleavage was barely concealed by a fur-trimmed dress and a half-dozen necklaces ranging from pearls to beads to shiny stones. The dress was dark gray, almost black, with intricate patterns embroidered on the wide sleeves and hem. The rest of her gown had the boy in shock and awe, wondering how she could stand to wear it every day. The front of the dress was rather open, but it was hidden by more than 40 different belts interlocked in a mesh. The woman was also holding a stuffed doll in one arm, resembling a knight with a pumpkin for a hat. It was cute, but it seemed to clash with her black theme because it was pale yellow and bright red. He finally looked up from her startling appearance and smiled warily, his subconscious taking full control while his conscious tried to figure out what was up with the wacky memories of spork torture. She returned his smile with a warm gesture, leaning down and patting him on the head like a dog, his mind recognizing that she, too, had purple fingernail polish. His first words were, "Who are you? Are you going to hurt me as well?" Needless to say, the woman backed away as if slapped, her eyes wide with the startled realization that, yes, the child had been abandoned here to die, and it appeared that more had happened to him. The boy ... well, his conscious and subconscious were playing Mortal Kombat, with his conscious arguing that that was no way to greet someone in a strange area, while his subconscious had the advantage of saying worse things. His subconscious had weapons as well. Someone was clearly going for the kill. If Naruto had been paying attention, he would have noticed that the doll landed on its plush feet and remained upright. The woman approached him slowly, not wanting to scare him, and gently picked him up, cradling him in her arms as her motherly instincts kicked in. Despite the fact that his eyes were wide in fear and tears of impending doom threatened to spill, it looked exactly the same as if they had used the puppy eyes. His subconscious was winning the battle, and his instincts kicked in, causing him to stiffen and curl up into as small a target as possible. She finally introduced herself as Lulu after 3 hours of convincing the boy that she wasn't going to hurt him. When Naruto inquired about her unusual name, she simply stated that she was from another country. Naruto asked her where he was and why he was here after introducing himself. She'd explained that she lived here and that the reason would be found in the sack he'd been dragged here in. He'd explained that the Konoha villagers disliked him for some reason, but his memories were all jumbled and he couldn't sort them out correctly. The woman gently tapped him between the eyes, and a purple aura flared for a moment before his mind snapped into focus, his eyes widening in surprise at what had happened. Did someone tamper with my memories? Hokage Ajusan. This also surprised the woman, who wondered what the 3-year-old could have been through for the Hokage to have locked his memories. Her magical senses were going haywire for some reason around this boy, and she was determined to find out why. She tapped her chin thoughtfully. Unknown things had a habit of biting Lulu in the $sign when she didn't investigate them, and she harbored a deep resentment toward everything unknown to her. After politely asking the boy if he would mind if she did something to find out something about him, and receiving his confused acceptance, he simply replied, "Wah." She expanded her consciousness into her magic, allowing the purple aura to flare into life once more as she sought to discover that little unknown thing about the boy. Imagine her surprise when she discovered the boy was a Jinchuriki to Kyuubi, the 9-tailed demon fox. Did you know you had a 9-tailed demon fox sealed inside you, Naruto? The boy blinked quickly at that realization, until everything clicked into place. He flinched violently as he realized what had happened, dropping to the ground in despair, his head in his knees. "Is that why the villagers despise me? I'm Kyuubi." She rapped her knuckles on his head to get his attention, saving the child from his angst. She stated unequivocally that he was a human being. The fox was simply placed within a cage made from the boy's soul, where it could no longer destroy anything. The yondaime had apparently used him as a vessel, most likely due to his birthday. "Would you like to meet the fox? Naruto, would you like to meet the fox? That way, you could, say, ask him more about your life, as I'm sure he'd remember your memories, as the technique used probably didn't affect him." The small child reluctantly nodded, and Lulu tapped his forehead again, muttering sleep and lulling him to sleep. She redirected her consciousness into her magic and entered the boy's mind. Within a sewer, Lulu found herself trapped in a winding maze of sewers. She noticed the boy sitting there as if it were nothing out of the ordinary, making her cringe at the thought of his life. Before picking him up, she tapped him on the shoulder to get his attention. She strode purposefully to the source of a red glow emanating from deep within the sewers. When they arrived, they both noticed how large the fox was. Very large, bigger than 100 feet tall. They could barely see the tops of the cage bars, but chalked it up to poor lighting. The bars were held together by a slip of paper with the kanji seal written on it, and a red glow emanated from behind them. A threatening, echoing, growling snore. The silence was broken, surprising them both. Lulu strode up to the bars and smacked one, a loud boom echoing through the child's mind's large cavern. She obliviously noted that this boy's sewer water mind had no odor at all. Lulu stepped away from the bars, avoiding a large claw by several inches, and glared at the two massive, glowing red eyes that appeared through the darkness. Lulu let out a loud yawn, followed by a slight cough, as she attempted to focus the demon fox without blasting it. Lulu finally snapped and launched a thunder spell at the creature, lighting up the darkness with a bright flash of white light, and a resounding crack from the spell striking its target, the Kyuubi. The great creature's fur floofed up uncontrollably as a result of the spell, much to the delight of the small child who raced through the bars and onto the fox's head at speeds rivaling a Hurricane no Jutsu. Lulu couldn't help but snicker at the sight, a giggling Naruto playing with the fox's fluffy ears, while the fox was just staring at space, stunned not only that no one had fallen prey to his awesome introduction, but also that there was a child on top of his head, playing with his ears and "Ew, that feels good." Coherent thought quickly vanished as the child scratched that one special spot that he couldn't seem to reach, causing the fox to murmur of content, as he was too damn dignified to purr. Damn it. Maybe if his stomach was rubbed. No, worrying thoughts. There is no purring. Lulu eventually extracted the child from Kyuubi's head, much to Naruto's chagrin and the silent chagrin of the Kyuubi. Lulu finally calmed the boy down after he complained about petting Fluffy's ears, and told him that this was the fox sealed in him. The boy burst out laughing at the end of the sentence before straightening up and making a serious face. While this face was intimidating to most Hyuga members, it was adorable on a small child. Except for Hanabi. She is the Antichrist. Naruto finally asked the question that had been bothering him for so long. No, it isn't why did you attack. It was, may I pet your ears again? The question made Lulu's jaw drop to the ground, as did the Kyuubi's. Accepting the silence, the child bounded back up the fox's large leg, across his back, and onto his head, where he resumed petting the fuzzy ears. After 2 hours, after announcing because I felt like it. They were there, I was there, and I felt like fighting. So yeah, Kyuubi finally got to ask his question about why he attacked the village. Brat, why do you have a black mage in your head when they were all supposed to be dead thousands of years ago, with the last one being Lulu, a summoner's guardian? This prompted Naruto to announce loudly that the woman's name was Lulu, and the fox to stare at her as if he was studying her intently. After a few moments, he asked the question that caused her to take a step back in surprise, and Naruto to look on in confusion. Your soul couldn't die, could it? There's something binding you to the world of the living. The woman was now forced to explain that she was an unsent soul, one with ties to the realm of the living, or that there was something they needed to do, something they couldn't forget. She kept her humanity and sanity by shutting herself away from the world, avoiding the jealousy of the living that one normally feels when their soul lives without a body. This was met with an unnervingly sympathetic stare from a 3-year-old child, as well as a demon who seemed to agree with its container. Naruto and the fox eventually reached an understanding. He didn't completely forgive the fox for the devastation, but he understood why it attacked after the fox asked, "Why do villagers attack you?" Because they felt like, "Oh," they replied. In that regard, human stupidity knows no bounds, as the villagers were just as bad as the Kyuubi. After saying goodbye to the fox, Lulu finally picked up the child to leave. She was debating whether to keep the child when she remembered how he first acted when he met her. That was the final straw. She planned on raising the boy as her own and teaching him to be a black mage like her. Perhaps they could strike a deal with the Kyuubi to assist. Meanwhile, back in Konoha, by his standards, the Sandaime was having a fantastic day. The festival commemorating Kyuubi's defeat had gone off without a hitch, and he wouldn't have to pay another Yamanaka clan member to erase Naruto's memories. In terms of the boy, he hadn't seen him in 2 days. He quickly pulled out his handy crystal ball and began scrying for the blonde boy's whereabouts, homing in on a chakra tag left by the Hokage to ensure he knew where the boy was at all times. What he witnessed perplexed him. The boy was now in a cave, animatedly conversing with a pale-skinned, black-haired woman with a red eye. Before his thoughts could turn to the possibility that this woman was the Kyuubi. Having broken free from the seal, the woman looked up, almost as if she could see the Hokage through a crystal ball. Before he could laugh, because no one had ever detected his scrying, his ball cracked in a blast of energy that felt nothing like chakra. It finally shattered, leaving only the woman staring up at the Sandaime. The Hokage was taken aback because nothing like this had ever happened before. He luckily had a backup crystal ball for situations like this. He threw away the shards of his previous crystal, searching for the chakra tag once more. He couldn't find it, much to his dismay. He quickly dispatched 4 ANBU to spread out and look for any trace of the blonde boy, as well as to bring that woman in for questioning. Of course, knowing they were looking for the demon and the extremely vague description made them quite sloppy and sluggish in their search. After a week of no results, the Sandaime was forced to declare the boy dead, as nothing could be found to prove that he was still alive, and if the woman was who he thought she was, she would have killed him once she gained her freedom. This, of course, repealed his law referring to the boy, allowing most of the populace to continue telling their impressionable young children stories about the demon boy who used to live in Konoha. Naruto and Lulu are back. Naruto was perplexed when Lulu appeared to be staring at an imaginary foe on the ceiling before both of them heard the sound of breaking glass. She smirked before tapping Naruto on the brow and purifying his chakra system, dislodging the Hokage's chakra that was acting as a tracer. She elaborated, explaining what she had done, why she had done it, and how the Hokage was spying on him. The 3-year-old was furious with the elderly man, refusing to call him Hokage Jiji any longer after learning that he had apparently deemed him a flight risk and had placed a tag on him without even asking for his permission. The boy agreed to become Lulu's apprentice after she informed him that most ninja sensei would refuse to teach him anything because of his status in Konoha, and that many other villages were either inhumane in their teaching practices or turned their ninjas into living weapons. According to Lulu, black mages had to keep their cool at all times. Their destructive magic was too powerful for someone to go on a PMS killing spree because it could level an entire city. The boy had given it some thought, agreed to her terms, and began to change his behavior accordingly. Lulu had also explained the significance of a weapon to him. While ninjas use their weapons to attack, black mages use theirs to channel more powerful spells and minor weapons. She admitted that most black mages were physically weak, preferring to focus on evading and deflecting physical attacks rather than dealing them. Lulu's weapon, she explained, was her doll. She demonstrated how she used it as a conduit for her energy by demonstrating the Ultima spell, leaving Naruto stunned as the doll perfectly mimicked her actions, nearly fainting when he saw the destruction caused by the spell. He quickly decided that he wanted an awesome doll similar to Lulu Wanechan. The black mage considered this for a moment before a devilish grin appeared on her face. She told the boy about her plan, and he agreed wholeheartedly, giving the impression of an evil scientist. They both returned to the boy's seal to talk to the fox. The fox was adamant about not being a plush toy until Naruto pulled out the artillery and refused him ear scratching unless he agreed. This made his stone-cold resolve waver as he enjoyed the scratching. Lulu's comment sealed the deal, saying that the Kyuubi would be Naruto's weapon to use against his enemies if he so desired. The fox's power would be completely sealed into the plush toy, but controlled by Naruto himself. She also promised him a helping hand in the more destructive arsenal of black magics, which made him salivate at the prospect of the environmental devastation caused by the higher spells. After a complicated ritual, Naruto was the proud owner of a living, breathing, and cuddly stuffed nine-tailed fox, about a foot tall and 3 inches long from muzzle to tail tips. It was the same color as the real Kyuubi, with the same glowing shade of red for eyes. It would appear more menacing if it wasn't at the mercy of a 3-year-old. Lulu began to plan their training schedule, beginning with him forgetting everything he had ever learned about chakra because mana was different. When she remembered that this was a 3-year-old who had never been to the ninja academy, she almost fell flat on her face. Mana, she explained, is the purely spiritual component of chakra, which is composed of physical and spiritual energies. Chakra is less abundant in nature than mana, which is why black mages use it more. And, unlike chakra, if you use up all your mana, you don't die. The boy did it surprisingly quickly, giving Lulu a sadistic gleam in her eye as she considered how stupid the ninja village had to be to not recognize the boy's potential. Or they recognized it and assumed it was all the fox's fault. In any case, they threw pure platinum away because of a stupid bias. Lulu began teaching the boy how to control his mana immediately, beginning with the animation of the plush dolls. The Kyuubi was irritated by this point because he was not only a cuddly plush toy, but he was also immobile until the brat learned the fundamentals of being a mage. This was going to take some time. After 2 years, Naruto had learned how to animate his doll and had even improved a little. He hid some of his mana in the doll so it could move on its own, something Lulu had never attempted. Her dolls had no consciousness, whereas Naruto's was Kyuubi, so it probably wouldn't have worked anyway. The fox was able to increase his power by using his Yauki, which surprised Lulu and made Naruto laugh. If the fox was being honest with himself, the boy was becoming quite interesting. The unlocked memories had deeply scarred him, making trust a major issue. He'd have to think about it later because there was a rabbit nearby, and he'd be damned if he didn't tear it apart with his plush fangs. The battle was joined with a battle roar that sounded mostly like a fox kit yipping. After 3 years, Naruto had started learning the fundamentals of black magic, intrigued by the prospect of controlling 4 different elements. Lulu regretted that she had never learned to manipulate more elements to the extent that she had with fire, lightning, ice, and water. Those were considered the main elements when she was alive, and she had devoted herself to studying them. Things were done with water, earth, air, fire, and lightning nowadays. Ice had been completely forgotten. Naruto decided to try something new and immersed himself in learning the 5 basic elements, claiming that since he lived in this era, he should at least try to conform to its ways. After some mental prodding, Lulu was able to recall that, back when she was still alive and not a hermit, there were 1 or 2 spells concerning earth and air, and that if he started from scratch, it shouldn't be difficult to learn the entire element, as opposed to if he had learned it her way and tried to learn the new elements. With that decision made, the boy trained in the 5 ninja elements while learning the theory for ice alongside them, intending to create it his own way once the standard 5 were completed. Kyuubi was strangely learning to respect the brat. He possessed an iron will and was reworking the foundations of ancient black magic with logic and determination. He was almost proud of himself, but he quickly pushed that thought out of his stuffed mind as he searched for a new rabbit warren that hadn't yet learned of his mighty presence. After 4 years, Naruto, now 12, had mastered the new basics, as he referred to them. He'd mastered the 1st and 2nd tiers of elemental spells and was working on the 3rd. He'd also mastered Lulu's supplementary spells, such as Bio, Drain, Aspire, Toad, and Sleep. When she saw Naruto had taken Toad to a new level, turning rabbits into frogs to confuse his doll about the recent surge in frogs and decline in rabbits, the spirit chuckled behind her hand. The poor fox doll had sobbed for hours until the spell wore off, his ears pressed against his head and his big, menacing red eyes welling up with tears of sadness. Naruto and Kyuubi had grown close, and the fox had succeeded in instilling in the poor boy a love of fighting as well as a sadistic streak to rival Mitarashi Anko's. Lulu shuddered at the thought of what would happen if he learned break. He'd finally come to the conclusion that had surprised Lulu that it hadn't been thought of before, after applying extreme amounts of pure, preteen logic as well as curiosity. His inquiry: what exactly are spells? I know they're mana constructs used to manipulate the elements, but are they just patterns of weaving mana into controlling elements? She nodded after giving it some serious thought, which elicited an evil smirk from the boy. And isn't it possible that there are an infinite number of spells to learn and create? All one has to do is practice weaving their mana in a specific way until it becomes instinctual when paired with the spoken word. And there you go, a new spell. Lulu could not have been prouder of her student at the time. He had successfully dismantled black magic to its core and discovered its secret. She had never considered doing so before. When she informed her apprentice of this, his lips twitched into a genuine, happy smile, as if he had made his Nichan proud. His mental scarring had apparently been worse than either Kyuubi or Lulu had suspected, as the boy had quickly lost most emotions after beginning his training. Except for Lulu and occasionally Kyuubi, he rarely showed any sign of emotion. He was just as cold as ever while walking around alone apparently. Lulu tended to be overprotective of him and followed him when he walked off alone. She denied any knowledge of why she did it when questioned by Kyuubi. Normally, even Lulu would smile to herself as she reminisced about her younger days, but Naruto hardly ever expressed himself in genuine emotion. Sadism and mischief were not acceptable. After 2.5 years, Naruto had made the decision to go after Konoha, painfully, using a spork. After completing his training, he planned to take the Genin exam and become a Konoha ninja. He was going to screw with them from within, with the protection of the Hokage, who wouldn't do anything to him for fear of jeopardizing his successor's legacy. Naruto now knew who his parents were. He learned he was born to Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, the fourth Hokage, after speaking with the Kyuubi, who said, "Since you never asked, I thought you didn't care." His father was the same jerk who had sealed his fate at birth. Wow, Naruto had discovered that day that there was yet another reason to mock Konoha. They threw away their beloved Yondame's child, believing that by getting rid of the demon, they were doing the Yondame a favor. He laughed hollowly, wondering how stupid they could have been to not notice the resemblance. They probably couldn't see it now because he'd changed a little, but more on that later. His training with Lulu had gone extremely well. He could now team up with Kyuubi to cast more powerful magic, and the fox was overjoyed. He compared the feeling of Ultima being channeled through him to an orgasm of the highest proportions, surpassing the feeling of destroying a village, prompting Lulu to look suspiciously at her Onion Knight doll. He had mastered all of Lulu's spells, including the devastating flare spell. He was considered her equal in all matters of black magic, but the boy was still her junior in years. She died when she was 22, so she was still older than him. The woman had recently experienced strange feelings of faintness and fading. When she inquired about it, the doll replied that she was completing whatever tasks were required for her to pass on. They had kept this from Naruto, however, so as not to worry him. Lulu would never admit it, but the boy had grown into a rather attractive young man. He'd always be the little blonde boy she'd taken in from a burlap sack to her. She gave him a book called Fan People and How to Escape Them by Titus, written by one of her former comrades. Before Lulu and Kyuubi broke down and had to teach him about the birds and the bees, the boy raised a blonde eyebrow at the book. He stood about 5'11". He was only slightly taller than Lulu, and had grown his spiky hair out long, which caused it to straighten as it got longer, making him look a bit more mature than his age, and almost of noble descent. His golden locks ended at his knees, and were usually tied in a high ponytail. The fox had permanently combined a bit of his Yauki into Naruto's eyes, permanently changing the color to an amethyst purple, which Lulu thought was pretty, and Naruto simply groaned in response, but he was glad they weren't blue. His body type was thin, but not heavily so. He was, as Lulu bluntly put it, built like Willow Branch. His body would look fine on an acrobat, as Lulu had taught him her evasive tactics, forcing the boy to be able to react in an instant and bend to nearly Orochimaru's angles to avoid blows. Black mages were rarely physical, so his body didn't have a ninja's tone, but Kyuubi had suggested that the boy dress like Lulu, and when the senior black mage had asked what he meant by that, he had replied that she dressed like a high-class courtesan, and that it was distracting during a fight. Naruto decided not to wear the belt dress after sewing Kyuubi back together after the crazy bitch fried my stuffing for telling the truth, as he didn't think it would look right on him anyway. Instead, he was dressed in black shinobi-style pants that were slightly baggy and bandaged just above the ankle so they didn't impede movement. For his shirt, he decided to take a cue from Lulu's dress attire, much to Kyuubi's chagrin. It was a normal black long-sleeve shirt, with wide sleeves in the traditional mage style, allowing one to hide their hands, as well as makes it look cool when you. The whisker marks from the ritual of transferring the Kyuubi into a plush toy were gone, much to Naruto's delight. Now he could correctly infiltrate Konoha society, unless the Sandaime undid the law regarding his Jinchuriki status, in which case more chaos for him. Woo. His facial structure had changed a little after he had convinced Kyuubi to use Yaoki too. To the boy's dismay, his golden skin tone was natural, and not even Yaoki could change it. After a month, Naruto had 5 months before he had to return to Konoha to take the Genin test, and Lulu had asked him to talk with her for a bit, saying it was important. When he arrived at the cave where they had both lived for the past 11.5 years, he realized it had to be very serious. "Did you need to talk to me about something?" Lulu wasn't normally one to enjoy physical contact. She looked like she was about to cry, and her body seemed insubstantial. Quickly connecting the dots, he looked up, eyes wide in disbelief. "You're passing on to the other side." The woman nodded sadly, still clutching him tightly, a few tears escaping her uncovered eye. "I can't decide whether to be happy or sad. I'm finally leaving the mortal plane to return to where I belong. But I'm going to miss you, Naruto. I finally figured out what was keeping me here. I'd never had a child of my own and had always wanted to have one. You had filled that void in my life, and now that you're old enough to look after yourself, my life is finally complete. I'll be completely gone by tomorrow, so I wanted to spend this day with you before I left." For the first time in over a decade, Naruto let a tear fall from his eye and hugged the woman tightly, afraid that the moment he let go, she would vanish forever. "I'll miss you too, Lulu Akasan. You're the best older sister, parent I could have asked for, and you took me in when no one else would. I will be eternally grateful to you." Lulu looked up, surprised at her new title, even if it was only temporary, and stood on the tips of her feet, kissing him on the forehead as she used to do when he was a child. "You're everything I've ever wanted in a son. Please assure me that you will look after yourself. I'm not going to make you promise to teach black magic to others because I know you'll do what you believe is right. I believe in your judgment." The rest of the day was spent reminiscing about their time together until she began to shimmer and fade around 3 a.m. Her final words before she vanished were, "I love you, Naruto. I'll always be there for you, if only in memory." The fox was silently mourning the passing of the woman as well, as she had become a greatly respected individual in the fox's eyes. The woman could deal out incredible destruction one moment, and be as gentle as a spring breeze the next. Truly a wonderful individual. Naruto grabbed the Kyuubi doll and hugged the fox to him, taking solace in his last friend. The following day, Naruto had sealed up the entire area, preventing any trespassers from desecrating Lulu's resting place. He had used up most of his power to create a gleaming ice sculpture that would be forever frozen, in the exact likeness of Lulu, holding her Onion Knight doll in one arm, backed by all the likenesses of her friends from back when she was alive. Naruto stood up and picked up Kyuubi from the ground, cradling him in his arm as Lulu had taught him, and replied, "We're going to travel for the next 4 months and see fire country outside of this cave." For the next 4 months, the Sandaime was haunted by reports from all over Fire Country of a tall, blonde-haired teenager carrying a stuffed nine-tailed fox plush toy. After 4 months, Naruto, now 15 because his birthday had just passed, was standing outside the gates of Konoha, waiting for the damn gate guard to notice him and open the gate. After several minutes of waiting, he finally gave up and set the Kyuubi toy down, smirking as Kyuubi sprinted as fast as his little feet could carry him towards the gates. A passing traveler would later tell his friends in a bar about a blonde guy with a fox plush who broke down Konoha's gates. "No, I wasn't drunk." Naruto gathered the doll in his arm and could swear he heard a muttered "damn right it didn't stand up to me." And the fucking Kyuubi no fucking kitsune. A swarm of a NBU surrounded him, as if preparing to attack, but the teen simply looked up, made a mock innocent face, and declared, "What? I let myself in because no one was paying attention to open the gate for me." The majority of the ANBU guards fell flat on their faces at the revelation, turning to glare at the gate guard who had awakened from his sleep to gaze in awe at the 30-foot tall gates that were now lying on the ground. As they returned their attention to the blonde man, they noticed he had vanished, leaving no trace of his presence. The captain quickly used Shunshin to head to the Hokage's office to report the possible intruder. The Hokage's office. The secretary stared to glare at his fox toy, asking how he dare bring something like that into wonderful Konoha. He simply looked at her, looked at the toy, blinked a little, looked back up at her, and replied in a polite yet mocking tone, If you want to vent your rage on a toy that resembles a demon fox, you're a really stupid woman. Wow, give yourself a pat on the back. Because I'm sure your mind believes that the stuffing used to make this doll is 99% evil and 1% demon. I hope you're proud of yourself for directing your rage at inanimate objects. The woman was astounded that this attractive blonde man could politely tell her she was stupid and get away with it. She was resisting the urge to call him Sama, as it was. He walked past her before she could respond, saying he was sure he could get more done if he simply asked the Hokage directly if he had any openings. If his secretary was ignorant enough to take her rage out on inanimate objects, could she be trusted to do her job correctly? He knocked on the door after nodding to the two ANBU guarding it, and stepped inside after hearing a muffled enter. As soon as he walked in, someone pointed at him and yelled loudly that he had broken down the gates. He looked at the man, blinked, then looked down at his toy, who began to fidget as if holding in laughter. He finally looked back up at the Hokage, who was staring at him with suspicion, and said the same thing he had said to the ANBU. Your gateman was doing an insufficient job and was too busy snoring to open the gate for me, so I let myself in. Wouldn't I have killed him on my way in if I was truly an enemy? As he spoke to the man, his glittering eyes hardened into a glare far superior to that of a Hyuga or a Uchiha. If you can't do your job and figure out who is an enemy and who isn't, quit now before you kill someone. I need to speak with the Hokage about something, and you're currently making a complete fool of yourself. Please remove yourself from the premises, or I will assist you. The ANBU looked around in disbelief before pulling himself up to his full 5'8" height, attempting to appear as intimidating as possible. As he spoke down to this civilian who dared to threaten him, an ANBU captain, his mouth twisted in a sneer, and his voice took on a haughty tone. What give you the right to order me around? He swears the man's fox toy was smirking at him, and he didn't have much time to consider the possibility of an inanimate object having facial muscles before he was yanked out of the room forcibly through the open window. Naruto had delivered a powerful snap kick to the stomach, augmented by a little of his magic. The man was thrown over 30 feet before collapsing against the side of a building and being knocked out. He returned his attention to the Hokage, who was about to press his call the ANBU button when the teen spoke up, closing the door behind him and closing the window. Before you even try to call more ANBU on me, I have done nothing wrong. He asked me what right I have, and I showed him. I have the right of diplomatic immunity due to not being a citizen of Konoha while I am here. As I am not subject to any of your laws, and he was threatening my authority, I dispatched him in the way I felt befitted him. He really should learn to do his job correctly. The Hokage was stunned, having to admit that the teen had him in a political bind. However, the way he delivered his speech reminded him too much of Itachi. As soon as he saw the fox doll in the man's arm, he knew he'd found the man he'd been looking for, and he quickly used a silencing jutsu to silence the room. He spoke with an authoritative tone, as if daring the man to deny his demands. I need your name and age, and I need you to accompany me to the council room so they can discuss whether you can join the academy for the exams. The man's lips twitched slightly before returning to the emotionless line. His eyes, on the other hand, were glistening with sadistic delight. My name is Naruto, and I'm 15 years old. The pipe clattered to the floor as the Hokage's jaw dropped. He nearly gasped as he looked at the boy, taking in his golden skin, flaxen hair, and the Kyuubi doll in his arms. This was not the same Naruto who had vanished 12 years before. Naruto had whisker marks, blue eyes, and had no idea about the fox, and his facial structure was off. His mind was troubled by the resemblance, so he chose to inquire, "Is there a surname?" Naruto argued briefly before picking up his fox toy and asking it a question aloud, making the Hokage question his sanity. "What are your thoughts? Should I tell him?" When the doll responded, the Hokage reached for the ANBU button. "Sure, that'll be a kick in the pants for him." A polite cough drew his attention before he could press the button and summon the ANBU to question the teen with the talking doll. The doll and the young man were both staring at him. "My original name was Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. I gave up my surname years ago when this village abandoned me. As I was declared dead, there's nothing you can do about it, Hokage-san. I am currently not a citizen, due to my status of deaf. By the way, you might want to tell the Yamanakas to work on their memory jutsu, because the one they kept using on me, at your order, only locked." Sarutobi stared at the young man in front of him before his gaze was drawn to the fox plush currently perched on the blonde's shoulder, and he glared angrily at it. Naruto noticed this and glared back, a violet aura flaring for a moment and blasting everything away from him, causing paperwork to whirl, staplers and pens to embed into the walls, and the Hokage to apply chakra to his feet to stop them from moving. "Before you say anything about the doll," He's actually been more of a friend to me than anyone else in Konoha. I earned his respect through my hard work. And if you can't see past the fact that he's a demon, then I'll simply go to Kumo or Iwa. I'm sure they'd simply adore having someone like me there. The Hokage's ears perked up a little at this. He cast another half-hearted glance at the fox toy, who smirked smugly back before sighing in resignation. He desperately needed that boy, damn it. It was the only thing he had left of his successor. He raised an eyebrow as his mind wrapped around the last part of the blonde's statement. What do you mean Someone like you? Aside from your Jinchuriki status, I don't think you were all that different. Naruto simply smirked, his amusement visible in his eyes. I guess you could say I have a bloodline. And it's all me. The Kyuubi has been in that doll for the past 12 years, so he has nothing to do with it. I am highly proficient in using elemental techniques without hand seals, and can do some techniques in tandem with my doll to cause significant environmental destruction. The Hokage was taken aback by this and gave it some thought. There had never been a record of such a bloodline. Perhaps becoming a Jinchuriki altered and created parts of his DNA. The fox enjoyed wreaking havoc. Alright, I'll let you take the genin test tomorrow. Will you accompany me to the council chamber? The adolescent nodded, the fox toy hopping into his arms and lying motionless, as if it were truly inanimate. The Hokage grabbed his shoulder, saddened that this had happened to his successor's son, and used Shunshin to enter the council room. In the council chamber, with a standard puff of black smoke, the Hokage and Naruto entered the room. The council was taken aback by the teen's attire before they all noticed the fox doll and glared at it as one. When Naruto noticed their animosity, he felt compelled to be chaotic. With a single clear word escaping his lips, he raised his arm above his head and sliced diagonally to the lower right. Waterja, a veritable tsunami erupted from thin air and charged the council, doing little more than drenching them. They avoided looking at the boy, whom they had mentally pushed to the side as a non-threat, and instead focused entirely on the doll. The Hokage was taken aback, but quickly recovered his composure and addressed the soaked council. We've gathered here to assess the likelihood of this young man here becoming a Konoha shinobi. As you can see, he has a bloodline ability that allows him to use elemental manipulation abilities without the use of hand seals. The entire council perked up when this happened. Before the man stepped forward, the nine-tailed fox doll on his shoulder and glared at them. I will say this right now, I will not be a breeding stock for you or anyone else. If you try to control me in any way, I will not only destroy the attempt, but also the one who ordered it, as well as a large section of residential area where they reside. This is not a threat, this is a promise, as I will not tolerate being simply brown-nosed by bloodline lovers. I refuse to have a harem to create super soldiers for you, and you can. The Hokage gaped at the boy who had just openly threatened the council, who were all enraged at the audacity of this commoner to dare to address the honored council in such a manner, let alone threaten them. But before they could protest, he said something else that made them realize how vulnerable they were. You're currently drenched, and even a minor shock could cause a heart to stop. As I previously stated, I refuse to be your puppet, experiment, or breeding stock. I'd be an employee, not a slave. The analogy elicited a small nod from the Hokage, and the council realized that this man had them by the balls. Danzo, ever-loving bastard that he is, decided to open his mouth. Surely we could work out a deal to incorporate your bloodline into Konoha. The doll moved as a result of this. Everyone was taken aback when the doll moved in front of Naruto, its teeth bared and tails flicking from side to side in a hypnotic pattern. Before the room descended into chaos, the man uttered a single word. Flare. A swirl of orange flame spiraled down beneath Danzo's feet before exploding into a pillar of white-hot flame, completely engulfing the man while causing no harm to anyone nearby. Sarutobi was taken aback by the brutality, realizing that he knew nothing about this Naruto. He was naive to believe that the boy could vanish for 12 years and then reappearance, minus the burlap bag. To restore silence, the Hokage had to pound on a desk and yell, and the entire council began shouting for the death of the man who killed Danzo. They mostly wanted to kill him because he had an animated Kyuubi doll. The teen began to leave because he had had enough. The most arrogant members of the council, primarily from the civilian side, inquired as to his whereabouts. I'm leaving to go somewhere where I'm wanted as a person. Not as a tool. I'm going to Kumo, Iwa, or Suna so I don't have to put up with this. The council, predictably, fell at his feet, desirous of such a great bloodline. They offered everything they had, including wealth, women, and celebrity. Naruto gave them the most chilling glare he could muster and silenced them all. You only want me for my bloodline. You people make me sick with how you elevate all those with bloodlines to a pedestal, pandering to their every whim. I've made a decision, however. I'll become a shinobi for this village, if only to spite all of you. I'll work directly under the Hokage, which means you can't sink your claws into me. You people are worse than the Kyuubi ever was. The golden-haired teen picked up Kyuubi, who was hysterically rolling on the floor at this point, and vanished in a swirl of water, the ground where he stood not even wet. The Hokage raised his eyes to the shocked council members, his two teammates grinning conspiratorially, as if they could persuade the boy to join them. I hope you are all proud of what you have done. That boy probably has more power than I do, and any attempts to gain his favor will now be met with death. He has the potential to destroy the village if he so desires, so I suggest you all leave him alone. Most, however, were not paying attention and were plotting how to get their daughters to seduce the man. The Hokage sighed and walked away, realizing why Naruto had changed so drastically. Human stupidity truly knows no bounds. Naruto jerked awake in his new apartment, a gift from the Sandaime after his old one was burned multiple times in celebration. According to Kyuubi, one of his most annoying quirks was his light sleeping habit combined with intense paranoia if he wasn't back at the cave. And after exactly 7 hours, 58 minutes, and 53 seconds, he would awaken instantly, with no signs of ever being asleep in the first place. It was a pain in the $sign for the poor fox plush, who loved to nap and sleep in. Of course, he wouldn't dare to say anything for fear of losing his wonderful ear scratching. Naruto picked up his Kyuubi doll and headed out of the apartment, his wet hair pulled back in its standard high ponytail. After taking a quick, ice-cold shower and putting on an identical outfit to the one he wore the day before. It couldn't have been later than 7:30 a.m., so most of the village was still sleeping, with the exception of ninja parents getting their children ready for school. The thought nearly made Naruto snort. Are you getting ready for school? They're supposed to be trained killers, and their parents simply ask, what do you want for lunch? They're not offered psychiatric help if they show signs of a personality disorder. They must believe it is just a quirk, as the Jounins are prone to. They must be overjoyed. As if sensing his resentment, the doll cuddled up into Naruto's arms, causing Naruto's focus to shift to scratching the doll behind the ears. He continued down the winding streets on his way to the academy, completely ignoring the strange looks at his attire or the hate-filled stares at his doll. The Kyuubi, on the other hand, saw everything and decided to speak up to warn Naruto. Brat, people are staring at me again. I think my attack must have created a sixth sense for anything fox-related, because they don't even seem to realize your existence. Just that there's a Kyuubi doll in Konoha, so it must be destroyed. Hearing the soft mumble of his doll, Naruto came to a halt in the middle of the street and looked around. Several villagers were staring at the doll, and a few were picking up weapons. The teen sighed and placed the doll on his shoulder, mumbling loudly enough for everyone to hear. Idiots can't tell a 1-foot-tall doll from a 100-foot-tall fox, which is why their village was attacked. If it hadn't been for the Yondaime, the entire village would have been dead before they had the foresight to investigate the lumbering behemoth bearing down on them. When they heard this, many villagers became enraged and approached the boy, their mouths twisted into hateful sneers. Who are you, and why have you brought that thing into our village? Naruto let a malicious chuckle escape his lips as he saw yet another opportunity to sow discord, the likes of which Orochimaru could only hope to match. Oh, you don't remember me, and fat demon brat you threw out 12 years ago. Spread the word. I'm sure your council has figured it out by now, and if you mess with my doll again, you won't live to regret it. With that, he brushed past the encroaching horde, still talking quietly to his doll, who was giggling quite cutely for an immortal fox spirit trapped within a plush toy. Makes me wonder why that man chose to sacrifice 2 lives to this hellhole, but oh well. The past is the past, and there's nothing I can do about it. At least I met Lulu Nichan as a result of their stupidity. To avoid suspicion, the fox doll nodded emphatically before stiffening and acting as if it were inanimate once more. He'd arrived at the academy by this point, and he entered with trepidation. He approached the receptionist and informed her that he had come to take the exams. When she saw his doll, he briefly considered turning her into a statue and freezing her with that ugly snarl on her face for all eternity, before dismissing the idea. The Sandaime may become irritated if too many of his people become full-size lawn ornaments. The woman finally broke free from her stare down with the inanimate object, flashing a charming grin and directing him to room 103 to join Iruka's class. As he walked away, the receptionist clearly heard a mumble and a convincing high-pitched whine imitating her speech. The woman sputtered in outrage at how the boy portrayed her, but if she hadn't been completely deafeningly deaf, Everyone in Konoha must be bipolar when it comes to foxes. Oh, it's so nice to see you. Is that a Kyuubi doll? What is that doing here? Are you going to destroy it? Oh, you're walking away. Well, it was nice to meet you, person that I don't know, but don't bring the cursed demon trash back here again. In room 103, Aruka was currently attempting, but failing miserably, to silence his class. Today was the Genin exams, and the entire class was overjoyed. Except for Sasuke. He was reflecting on Itachi's earlier graduation. He was about to use his own secret method to silence them all when the door opened, causing everyone to turn to face the intruder and immediately quiet. The young man was quite attractive, though his clothing was a little off. And was that a Kyuubi doll perched on his shoulder. The entire class erupted in a burst of killing intent except for Sasuke, who was too preoccupied with his own little world to notice the newcomer. Naruto strode elegantly up to the desk and tapped on it, drawing the teacher's attention away from his doll. I'm here to take the Genin exams. Hokage-sen said he'd see if he could make an exception for me since I'd been gone for 12 years. And Yuzuka Kiba decided to yell quite loudly at this point. What? You are not permitted to take the exams. You were never enrolled in the class to begin with. The adolescent took a paperclip from the teacher's desk, considered it for a moment before flicking it over his shoulder and nailing the boy between the eyes. You should learn to remain silent when your teacher is speaking. The newcomer elicited hushed mutterings from the class. If the quiet squeals were any indication, he was steadily building a fanbase. In his head, he thanked Lulu profusely for giving him that book, as he hadn't been caught by fangirls since. Aruka finally found the note that the Hokage had left him after sorting through all the papers on his desk, saw the name of the person he was supposed to allow to take the test, and gasped in surprise. Naruto almost snickered when he saw this. His doll twitched in anticipation of the total chaos his name would cause. Aruka regained his composure and, using his teacher's authoritative tone, politely asked him to introduce himself to the class, assuring him that he would be taking the exam. This was met with loud disbelief from many in the class, until Aruka silenced them by saying he had a note from the Hokage. My name is Naruto, and I have abandoned my surname for reasons I'd rather not reveal. My likes, I like to be left alone, and I like my doll. Dislikes, biases, arrogance, and stupidity. Hobbies, fighting and training. Future dreams, I have none. The entire class stiffened at his name before turning their heated glares on him rather than the doll, making the obvious connection between the doll and the golden-haired teen from their parents' stories about the monster child who had been killed 12 years before. Perhaps he had returned from the dead to exact his revenge. Many people recoiled in terror at the thought. Naruto stifled a yawn. His doll was trembling subtly, trying hard not to burst out laughing. He yanked it off his shoulder and cradled it in one arm, allowing its snickering to be muffled by the fabric of his sleeve. He slid back to an empty chair in the corner, staring indifferently at the entire class that was staring at him. Aruka awoke from his stupor and began administering the paper tests. 30 minutes after the paper test, outside, Naruto was certain he had failed the damn test. He was never good at paperwork and, to be honest, couldn't bring himself to care about the majority of the questions. Things like general history of a ninja village were rather stupid when you consider that history is created by the winners, bending it to their will, and that entire villages can be wiped out in a matter of days to a few weeks, rendering history completely obsolete. What is your kunai throwing theory? Who needs a theory about that? The only question he considered worthy of an answer was, how was the Kyuubi defeated? He reasoned that his response would almost certainly cause the teachers to have aneurysms at the same time. Kyuubi was sealed within a living person, dooming them to a fate of being an outsider within their own home village, hated by the very people he was supposed to protect. They were on their way to the practical portion of the Genin exam, and Naruto had to stop himself from groaning in despair at the absurdity of it all. Clone illusions, target practice with kunai, hand-to-hand combat with a chunin. With skills like that, how are these kids supposed to protect themselves? They were his age, but when it came to skill or even the proper mindset of a shinobi, they were a long way behind. After summoning all of the other students to complete their kunai exams, the teacher summoned Naruto. The teacher had noticed that the teen lacked weapon pouches and had pointed this out to him. Most of the genin to be burst out laughing, but his response quickly silenced them. I specialize in large-scale destruction using powerful elemental techniques. If I ever engage in hand-to-hand combat with a kunai, the person I'm fighting better kill me, because that puny knife won't help you at all unless you hit someone in the heart, throat, or brain. The teacher was taken aback by the fact that not only had a student essentially called him and the majority of the shinobi populace idiots, but he had a damn good reason to do so. He eventually picked up his jaw and told the boy that he still needed to hit the targets. Naruto shrugged and tossed the plush toy to the ground while raising an arm. Before slicing his arm through the air, a light purple aura flared behind him, sparkling slightly in the morning light. His mouth only said one word, thunder. As soon as the second syllable ended, 10 identical white lightning bolts arced from the cloudless sky, slamming down on each target and exploding from the force. The students stared in awe and fear at this newcomer, and the teacher appeared to be about to wet his pants. Sasuke, on the other hand, was brooding. He desired that power and vowed to obtain it by any means necessary. The golden-haired teen raised a blonde brow at the instructor, scooping up his plush doll in his right arm before turning to face the man and asking the obvious question. Does that pass for precision? Iruka nodded mutely before leading the class into hand-to-hand combat. After 30 minutes, it was finally his turn after several students scored glancing blows on the teacher, who Naruto could have sworn was going easy on a few of the weaker ones. When his name was called and he was set up against the assistant instructor, he was jolted out of his thoughts about how the clans probably bribed the teachers to let their kids pass. Mizuki appears to harbor a grudge against him, or so he thought, judging by the glare that was nearly burning the grass with its hatred and malice. He clung to his doll, not putting it away for this part of the exam, and stood firm. The assistant instructor reasoned that it would be prudent to try to provoke him into attacking first, so he came up with the first thing he could say to provoke him. Are you going to put your doll away for this? Are you afraid it'll get dirty? He was surprised by the response. Naruto began to laugh a hollow, creepy laugh. It took him a few moments to calm down before he could respond, and his response flipped the script, prompting the teacher to attack first. I'm more afraid that putting it down will hurt you, so I'm doing you a favor by keeping it away from you. Come at me if you can. The Chunin snarled at the mockery, his rage fueled by the fact that many of his classmates were snickering behind his back. He charged at the student, attempting to wipe the smirk from his face. He hurled everything he could at the adolescent, including a few kunai. Of course, whenever he brought out the weapons, Iruka politely turned his head to ask a student a question, as he, too, had a grudge against the demon. The man was hoping Mizuki would severely injure the boy, and wouldn't pass up the opportunity to see it happen. Naruto was dodging everything Mizuki could throw at him, relying on his incredible flexibility and lithe body to avoid most projectiles. He deflected every punch thrown at him and even redirected a few kicks with his unoccupied left hand. He was mostly just dodging. He sighed in resignation before approaching the teacher, his face emotionless. Are you going to hit me, or should I just end this now? You're embarrassing yourself in front of your own students. The Chunin snapped, his hands immediately forming hand seals for a jutsu, hoping to finally kill the brat. But before he could finish the last seal, the boy vanished in a blur, and his world fell into darkness. Naruto took a step back from the unconscious teacher after jabbing the pressure point at the base of his neck to knock him out. He didn't want to engage in a technique battle with the man because he might accidentally kill him. For good measure, he kicked the unconscious assistant in the groin, confident that the man would wake up with a severe ache. He turned around to face Iruka, who was agitated. I beat your assistant in hand-to-hand combat, despite the fact that I thought weapons and jutsu were prohibited. If they hadn't been, I would have just knocked him out at the start. Ah well, no harm done, eh? The pressure from the Chunin teacher's hands was causing the clipboard to crack. He gave a brief nod before telling the class to go inside while he took Mizuki to the hospital to rest. After 15 minutes, the classroom. Iruka returned to the classroom to find his newest student in an unusual situation. He was declining all date offers, which surprised Naruto that they would want to date him for about 4 seconds before he realized why. He quickly recognized the clan head's daughters in the council, and had to restrain himself from going over there and killing the rest of them. The teacher cleared his throat and asked them to stand in front of the class to demonstrate the final portions of the exam. Until it was time for Naruto, a few tried to show off, most notably Kiba and Sasuke. He took a step forward and asked an absurd question in a deadpan tone. Is this required to pass? I'm a destruction specialist, and I'm not familiar with the henge, bunshin, or kawarimi techniques because they're completely useless in my line of work. Iruka nodded, stating that passing the test was absolutely necessary. When the teen sighed, the man had to suppress an evil snicker, thinking he was going to give up, before the response shocked him. Whatever. Do you want me to make illusionary copies of myself that can be dispersed with a single hit? Or do you want me to destroy an entire city block in one technique? I'm more than capable in combat than most jounin, but the genin test is so stupidly easy that the techniques almost never get used, aside from the kawarimi. If I fail the exam, who cares? I'll just head off to another village that has genin tests based on real combat. Uruka began to sputter angrily as the Hokage's note specifically instructed him to pass the teen. With no other option, he sighed and asked the boy to stay after class. The rest of the class was torn between mocking the genin who couldn't use the 3 required techniques and admiring his raw destructive power. After the others had left with their hit, Naruto approached the desk and picked one up, tying it around his left thigh. When Uruka asked what he was doing, he replied truthfully before disappearing in a swirl of lightning, leaving a resounding boom behind him. I know the Hokage would have forced you to pass me, so just put me dead last if you want. I'm being paid to fight and kill people, so any team is fine with me. Later that night, on his way home from exploring the surrounding forests, Naruto discovered a squad of ANBU waiting to question him in his apartment, so he muttered a soft break. 2 ANBU were imprisoned immediately in a large, thick gray boulder. The remaining 2 ANBU attacked him, immobilizing him by grasping his rather long hair. Their triumph was fleeting, as the boy mumbled a soft bio break, encasing his bright golden hair in a thick, green sludge that slipped off the locks and encased the ANBU before vanishing into thin air. As they looked up and down to figure out what the teen was trying to do, their arms and legs became immobilized. As they looked down, they saw that their bodies were turning to stone. Naruto walked over to the large boulder and tapped it, causing it to crack and shatter into fine dust on the floor, revealing the other 2 ANBU's horrified stone faces. He picked them up and headed to the Hokage's office in a swirl of wind, assisted by his battle doll. 9 p.m. Hokage's office. The Hokage was about to leave for the day, a wrathful glare directed at the ever-increasing paperwork, when 2 presences made themselves known. Naruto was standing there with his doll, carrying 4 statues that looked suspiciously like ANBU. When the boy spoke, his obvious question was answered before he could ask it. They wanted to capture me and bring me in for questioning. Unless I want to reverse the technique. So either you start telling me right now why you're trying to abduct me from my own apartment, or someone else is able to order the ANBU around. The Hokage was stunned by the accusation, though on the inside he was cursing himself for asking ANBU to accompany him back to the Hokage Tower so he could ask him a few questions that had slipped his mind when they first met. He was about to apologize to the teen with a heavy sigh when he was cut off again. Don't bother apologizing. It's not your fault that they tried to bring me here forcibly. However, you should finally realize that I'm not well liked at all in this village, and you should have either sent a clone or sent someone you trusted, instead of sending off random ANBU to get me. If they do this again, I promise they'll be brought to your office in bags of gray dust. Before speaking, the Hokage leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. I had a few questions for you that I forgot to ask when you first arrived. Can you release them from the technique now? The teen nodded slightly, a pale violet aura enveloping him before the stone seemed to fade away from the ANBU bodies, which were still frozen in shock and horror. Naruto turned to face them and gave them a hard stare. If you ever try to apprehend me or attack me in my own home, I will not stop turning you to stone. I will kill you in the most explosive way imaginable, just like I did to Danzo. Do not let your petty hatred of me interfere with your jobs. If you want to live, you will leave this office now, before I find a way to permanently alter you on a genetic level. The ANBU glared at him before fleeing via Shunshin, as if heeding his warning. Naruto returned his attention to the Hokage and sat in a chair. His initial words were, "What exactly did you require?" The Hokage looked suspiciously at the doll, which was cradled in Naruto's arm. He just couldn't shake the feeling that that little plush toy had killed off a large portion of the village and claimed his heir. He was almost certain the fox was influencing the boy's behavior. I was going to ask you who that lady you were talking to was before she broke my crystal ball. Naruto appeared to be feeling something at this point. His scowl deepened, his glittering purple eyes flashing in rage at the elderly man. She was my caretaker, and the next time you think it's a good idea to put a chakra tag on me so you can spy on me, I will destroy every single one of your crystal balls. I don't take being spied on lightly, and if you had that damn tag on me, then why weren't you able to protect me better when I was a child? If my memory serves correctly, quite a few memory techniques were used on me to erase traumatic. The Hokage was struck by the teen's well-placed rage, desperately trying to come up with a reason for the tag to appease the young man. His mind was awash with regret that he could have used that tracing tag to ensure the boy's well-being at any time. But every time he saw the little ball of sunshine, he was forcefully reminded of the resemblance to his successor, and couldn't bear to be near it because it brought up memories of better times. The boy was already standing up and walking towards the window before he could mount a strong defense. The parting shot fired over the Hokage's shoulder chilled him to the bone. I only serve this village so long as it serves me. I will not be your mindless weapon. I will not emulate my sire and try to protect this village. I will stay so long as it serves my needs, and when the time comes that it tries to control me, as I'm sure it will, I will leave and never look back. Your village is irreversibly corrupted, Hokage-san, and there's nothing you can do about it." The boy vanished, a black hole surrounding him before collapsing and teleporting him away. The Hokage appeared to be much older than his years, rubbing his temples as he tried to relieve a severe headache. 7:30 a.m. the next day. Naruto got ready for team assignments after waking up and bolting to a sitting position in his bed, dislodging his soft companion from his resting place on his chest. He decided to leave his hair down for the day after a quick shower and wearing his regular clothes. As he walked, it dried quickly, with 2 long locks of hair framing his face and falling halfway down his chest. They'd start to spike if they were any shorter. To his delight, the Kyuubi doll was currently cradled in both arms, receiving simultaneous ear scratching and belly rubs. If he'd known how good it would feel, he'd agreed to be the teen's doll much sooner, possibly begging to be the doll, not that he'd ever admit it. The teen's long hair billowing behind him as he strode gave him an imposing appearance, causing Kyuubi to snicker as he noticed people looking at him in shock and awe. It was amusing to see fan clubs formed and disbanded at a rapid pace, formed at first sight and then disbanded once their minds caught up with the fact that they were following the legendary demon child. Many people alternated between fanaticism and hatred, resulting in something resembling an epileptic fit when they set their sights on the young man. Naruto was reminiscing about his time with Lulu. He longed for the woman and hoped she was happy wherever she was. Meanwhile, back on the far plane, Lulu was currently watching the TV broadcast of Naruto's life with the rest of the Final Fantasy X cast, who had very different first impressions of Lulu's apprentice. Kimori looked at him, blinked quickly, and asked in his distinct manner whether or not that was a man. Tidus was ecstatic to have found another blonde with fan people issues, and he began taking notes on the newest way to avoid them: complete separation from society, accompanied by intense hatred. Oron smirked at the boy, complimenting Lulu on passing on her attitude to a youngster. She had responded that, at the very least, she had not passed on Wakka's attitude. Wakka was complaining about how the teen appeared too grumpy, obvious side effects of being cared for by Lulu herself. Yuna had softly laughed, congratulating Lulu on finally finding someone to love like a son. She also noticed that the boy had taken a fashion cue from Lulu's outfit, much to the chagrin of the black mage. Riku had squealed, staring at the blonde. That is, until she discovered his attitude and the source of his attitude and unleashed her massive flames of feminine fury on the people of Konoha. Returning to the story, Naruto had finally arrived at the academy. He silently glided across the floor, oddly wondering how much better he'd look in a dress like Lulu's before dismissing the thought. He wouldn't look good in that dress, no matter what. Men lacked cleavage. Kyuubi whimpered slightly as the ear scratching and belly rubs stopped, prompting the teen to smile warmly at the doll. The Kyuubi was startled into freezing in place, wondering if it was an imposter. But no one had magic fingers like Naruto, so it had to be the genuine article. After his fears subsided, he froze himself in place to resemble an inanimate object once more. Naruto sat down and sighed, having entered the classroom and made it all the way to the back without being noticed. Iruka rattled off the teams before arriving at his. Team 7, led by Hatake Kakashi, will consist of Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke. A deafening squeal resounded, cracking some of the concrete and shattering the windows, and Naruto. Before Iruka could relay the answer he had prepared for just such an occasion, the class erupted in confusion at the final name. The young man is a demolition genius, but he can't do normal ninjutsu, so we put him dead last with the Rookie of the Year and Kunoichi of the Year, hoping he'd learn some from them or his Jounin sensei. Everyone turned to look at the blonde in question, who was engaged in a staring contest with his doll on his desk. He asked politely, looking up and pretending to be innocent. "What? I don't think most ninjutsu are even worth learning. My bloodline techniques work much faster." Half of the class laughed, while the other half fell flat on their faces. Iruka sneered at the boy and exited the room, saying that the teachers would be there soon. After 3 hours, Naruto was meditating, his doll perched on top of his head. Sekiro was discreetly concealing a syringe, waiting for Sasuke to drop his guard so she could obtain some blood for her Sasuke shrine. Sasuke, who was well aware of the girl's intentions, had moved across the room and was looking at her suspiciously. This is the scene that Hatake Kakashi entered. The gray-haired Jounin was perplexed as to why the Uchiha heir was almost cowering in fear of a pink-haired man, who was currently attempting to conceal a syringe in an unorthodox manner. The final student drew the majority of his attention. The Kyuubi doll perched on his head was instantly subjected to one of his famous cyclopean glares, his uncovered eye beaming waves of hatred at the doll. The golden-haired boy, who he hadn't really noticed until now, opened his gem-like light purple eyes and glared right back at him. Naruto could feel the hatred coming from the doorway, so he looked for the source, which turned out to be one Hatake Kakashi, who was supposed to be his sensei. With a soft mumble of "just my luck," he picked up his doll and cradled it in his arm, walking up to the man and completely ignoring Sakura and Sasuke. He looked at the man apathetically, shrugging his shoulders slightly before tilting his head to the side and asking the obvious question. "I take it you're our teacher. Lead the way. Those two will probably be at it for the next 10 minutes, so just leave a note for them." Regardless of what his student was saying, he intervened in the fight, much to Kyuubi's silent chagrin. He wanted the Banshee to succeed if only to make the Uchiha feel permanently violated. He'd just have to wait and hope that some snake-like pedophile used his tongue on the boy to accomplish the same thing. Kakashi took them all to the roof and asked them to introduce themselves. "Please state your name, interests, dislikes, hobbies, dreams, and specializations." His voice had a lazy drawl to it, but Naruto could tell he was interested. Or, more likely, he was interested in Sasuke. If memory serves, Kakashi had an implanted Sharingan eye, so the council most likely bribed him to teach the Uchiha. Sakura looked up from her task of scooting as close to Sasuke as possible and asked the first question that came to mind. Yes, through one ear and out the other. "Sensei, I'm still perplexed. May I go first?" He rattled off in the same bored tone, stifling a sigh that would have inevitably escaped his face mask. "My name is Hatake Kakashi. My likes, dislikes, hobbies, you're too young to know, dreams." He cut himself off with a perverse giggle before continuing his introduction. "Specializations, ninjutsu and Sharingan application." Sasuke's head snapped up at the end, wondering how this man had a Sharingan despite not being a great Uchiha. Kakashi appeared to notice this and elaborated. "I have an implanted Sharingan eye. I can't use it as well as a true Uchiha like you, but I still use it well." "Pinky, it's your turn." Sakura scoffed at the moniker, glaring at her sensei before launching into her own introduction. "My name is Haruno Sakura, and my interests are, well, the person I like is..." She paused here to send a blushing glance at Sasuke. "My dislikes, Ianobuta. Hobbies," she cackled, casting several glances at Sasuke, who moved further away from her. When Naruto noticed Kakashi's puzzled expression, he decided to elaborate for his sensei. "She attempts to rape him or collects pieces of his skin and blood to decorate her Sasuke shrine." The gray-haired Jounin snickered, and Sakura simply stared at the flaxen-haired teen before continuing her introduction. "My dreams are..." She squealed and blushed a beet red when she heard this from Sasuke. After a brief pause, she concluded her introduction. "Specializations. I only know Academy Ninjutsu, so I don't have one, but I have good chakra control." Kakashi gave a small nod, wondering who he could pawn her off on. "Perhaps Kurenai." He returned his attention to the situation and nodded slightly to Sasuke, saying, "Your turn." Sasuke raised his head from where he was staring at the ground, puffing up his chest and preparing for his introduction. "My name is Uchiha Sasuke," he said as a dramatic wind blew through his hair, causing the duck ass to flutter in the breeze and his bangs to whip around. The wind died down after Kakashi cast a suspicious glance at Naruto's twitching mouth. The introduction went on. "I have no likes and many dislikes, primarily my fangirls." Sakura, who had heard this as "I love Sakura, I dislike not having Sakura around, and I dislike all fangirls besides my Sakura," squealed, "I love you too, Sasuke-kun," and had to be apprehended before attempting to rape the Uchiha heir. He resumed after the interruption was quieted. "Dreams for the future. I wouldn't call it a dream, it's more of an ambition. To kill a certain man." Here, the dramatic wind blew back full force, a foreign light source shining down on him as if to create a spotlight, which both vanished when Kakashi glared at Naruto again. "I specialize in fire jutsu, and I'll be unstoppable once I unlock my Sharingan." Finally, Naruto was introduced, and he nodded slightly when Kakashi acknowledged "you" with the fox doll. "My name is Naruto, and I enjoy training and fighting, as well as playing with my doll," Sasuke snickered, mumbling about girly dolls. The Uchiha could have sworn that killing intent began to emanate from the doll, and then he stopped talking. Kakashi looked at the doll suspiciously, looking for any reason to destroy it. "Dislikes are biases, arrogance, and corrupt politicians, which I've recently added. Hobbies, training, mostly. I meditate a lot." Dreams, I suppose, to serve this village until it tries to control me, and then leave, whether by choice or by force. My specialties include large-scale destruction, animating lifeless objects, and hand-to-hand combat. The second point was the final straw for the Jounin, who lunged at the doll, convinced that if his student could animate it, it was the Kyuubi incarnate. Before he could attack the doll and rip its stuffing out, he was struck in the chest by the boy's palm thrust, knocking him back to his seat. The boy continued as if it were an afterthought to his introduction, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just struck his teacher. I'm also irritated by people who think they can take out their completely irrational fear and hatred on my doll. Kakashi regained his composure and told them to meet him at Training Ground 7 at 6 a.m. the next day, asking Naruto to remain behind. The teen complied, scratching that special spot behind the fox doll's ears as he awaited his new teacher's inevitable question or possible attack. Said teacher was still staring, his hand itching for the opportunity to destroy the cursed doll. He finally returned to the present moment and spoke. Naruto, you and I should go see the Hokage about this. The boy just smirked and waved the man away, his voice indifferent. Whatever, Hatake-san, you go do that, and I'll return to my apartment. The Jounin lunged forward, grabbing the boy by the shoulder, and teleported to the Hokage's office using Shunshin. As soon as they arrived, he was met with one of the coldest stares he had ever received. Don't ever touch me again, Hatake. In fact, for attempting to attack not only my possessions, but also your completely irrational suspicions, you're going to enjoy what it's like to be prey, Toad. The Jounin felt himself shrinking with the spoken word, his clothing melding into his body as he vanished in a puff of green smoke. When the smoke cleared, he noticed he was much smaller than before, and there was a nine-tailed fox plush toy approaching him. Threateningly, he hopped around the Hokage's office, releasing a scream of instinctual terror that came out more like a ribbit, trying to escape the evil plush toy. The fox plush was having the time of his life, according to him. In his plush form, he was able to terrorize some inept ninja. The brat should let him do this more frequently. Naruto turned to face the Hokage and the two council members who were present in his office. The council members alternated between glaring at him, glaring at the doll, and flashing smug grins. The Hokage looked tired and slightly amused as a fox plush chased the small frog around. The Hokage finally spoke up. Naruto, could you change Kakashi back? I think he's learned his lesson by now. And I was about to send a clone to get you because these two council members have something to discuss with you about. Naruto shrugged uncaringly and twitched a finger, causing Kakashi to revert to his human form, looking panicked. The Kyuubi plush doll, on the other hand, delivered the knockout blow by biting viciously on the man's crotch, causing him to scream in agony before collapsing. Naruto knelt on the floor, arms outstretched, and smiled as the fox toy leapt into them, giving the fox some well-deserved belly scratches for a job well done. He turned to face the two elderly council members, who were now caught between glaring at him and wondering how he dared to attack a ninja in the Hokage's office. Finally, they resorted to smug smirking before opening their mouths to speak. Naruto-san, the Honorable Council has decided that you will be honored to tutor young Uchiha Sasuke in your techniques, so that he may succeed in killing his brother who murdered his clan. Naruto looked at them, blinked quickly, and then looked down at his doll. The doll began yipping in laughter and rolling across the floor. Naruto looked up at them, his face flushed from his shock at the stupid order, before glaring at them. I told you before, I will not let you control me. Take this as a warning, and enjoy your life as statues for the next 8 hours. Break. The two were encased in a thick gray stone, which dispersed in a gray cloud, leaving only two rough stone statues with their exact features standing there, horrified at the sensation of being petrified. Naruto turned to face the Hokage, who was once again taken aback by the boy's candor. If they try that again, they'll die horribly. When Hatake-san wakes up, tell him that he, too, has been warned, and that he should never threaten my doll again. The flaxen-haired young man then vanished in a stone pillar that shot out of the floor, leaving no trace behind, not even broken floorboards. 9 a.m. the next day, Naruto appeared in a swirl of fire, surprising both his teammates and his sensei, who had only joined them moments before. He glared at the golden-haired teen, who appeared to be exactly the same as the day before, though he swears the fox doll perched on his head was smirking victoriously at him. He explained the bell test and took out an alarm clock, which he set for noon. Kakashi was looking for his final student, hoping to tear the toy limb from limb for what had happened the day before. After a rather unimpressive display of fangirlism from Sakura, who fainted at the Genjutsu image of Sasuke near death, and a heated barrage of weaponry and jutsu from the Uchiha, he discovered the boy, who was leaning against a tree with the fox doll curled up at his feet. The jounin dashed into action, unleashing a torrent of kunai and fire jutsu on the cursed plush toy. Unfortunately, all actions were halted by a thick lightning bolt that arced through all of the metal weaponry, causing it to embed in the ground. A wave of water appeared out of thin air and evaporated into a thin mist, stopping the fire jutsu. Naruto finally emerged from his meditative state, glaring at the man. "Didn't I warn you not to try to destroy my doll?" The man glared back, enraged that not only had a genin stopped his assault, but that doll appeared to mock him. "I don't care. It needs to die because it resembles the Kyuubi." Naruto burst out laughing, stretching a little. "So anything related to the fox, inanimate or not, must be destroyed. Your blind hatred sickens me, Hatake. I won't even fight you, I'll let my doll fight you." Naruto sent a surge of mana through the doll, giving Kyuubi much more control over his actions as it accelerated to near jounin speeds. As the tails whipped around maliciously, attacking near his ankles, Kakashi had to dodge quickly. He couldn't fight back because the toy was too close for jutsu, and weaponry might impale his feet instead. When he was finally backed up against a tree, the toy actually laughed at him before speaking in a deep, growling baritone. "It appears that you have failed, Hatake-san." The doll lunged forward, knocking him to his knees with powerful strikes of its fluffy tails to the backs of his knees, before violently head-butting the man in the groin. Kakashi passed out from pain, landing face first on the ground. Naruto simply approached, grabbed the last bell, and tied Kakashi to the post. After 2 hours, the bell finally rang, rousing Kakashi from his slumber. The first thing he noticed was the excruciating ache in the area of his precious, as well as the ropes that bound him to the training log. When he opened one eye, he noticed that all 3 of his students were staring at him. Naruto was holding his beloved first edition director's Ika Ika Paradise, signed by the author, while Sakura held the other bell. The silence was broken by Naruto's voice. "Either we all pass or your book gets it." He quickly agreed, fearing for his adult literature. Sasuke and Sakura began to walk away, Sakura briefly debating whether or not to untie her sensei. But she decided against it because it would interfere with her Sasuke time. Naruto stood in front of him, a Kyuubi doll perched atop his head, contemplating the book. "Well, since you can't compete with one of your own genin students, I believe you need to train, and this book will only distract you." With that, the book exploded in a small burst of blue fire. Naruto vanished in a cloud of mist, expertly avoiding the impending disaster. The tranquil noontime sky was shattered by the echoing roar of "Not My Ika Ika." Kakashi pushed against his bonds, fueled by a force rivaling feminine fury. Perverted novel and danger adrenaline rush, similar to the surge of strength a mother feels when her child is in trouble. He broke free, sobbing bitterly over the ashes of his beloved book and vowing vengeance on its murderer. He was certain he could exact revenge now that he was the teen's jounin sensei, and that he could have him killed on a mission. After 5 months, Naruto was fed up after multiple attempts on his life as a result of Kakashi forcing him to carry Tora the cat around, and he was going to do something about it. Why didn't the man get a C-rank mission if he really wanted him dead? At the very least, he could kill something. He realized why the accursed cat despised her as he entered the Hokage's office and handed the accursed cat over to its owner, the fire daimyo's wife. He decided to express his concerns because he was also an experienced fluff ball caregiver. "Lady, you might want to relax your grip, you're probably causing the cat some pain, which is why it keeps running away." The woman was stunned for a moment before looking at her cat with interest. She had an epiphany as she squeezed it hard against her bosom, and it was mewling pathetically in pain. "Thank you for your advice, young man. Hopefully, my precious Tora will no longer flee from his cousin." Everyone in the room nearly fainted in shock as a result of her and his statements. They were brought out of their shock as she left the room, carrying a now happy Tora. Sakura was the first to speak up, yelling at Naruto for addressing the fire daimyo's wife in that manner. He simply stated, "If she wants my respect, she can take better care of Tora than that." Before Naruto snapped, the Hokage began to list off the various D-ranked missions they currently had in stock. "Either you give this team a C-rated mission, or your stash of literature will be burned to a crisp. I know exactly which drawer it's in, and I'm sure you want to keep it safe." The Hokage raised his head, startled. He never imagined the boy would be so ruthless as to endanger his poor Ika Ika. Yes, he did it to Kakashi, but agree to the mission, hero cage, or the crystal ball will get it as well. The Hokage was certain the boy was serious at this point. He wouldn't risk his crystal ball if he didn't have to. Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke were all confused by the literature and crystal ball comments, as well as outraged that he dared to speak to the Hokage without proper respect. The Hokage spoke just as Kakashi was about to reprimand him for his disrespect. I'll allow it. This is a C-ranked escort mission to protect a bridge builder in Nami no Kuni while he finishes a bridge. At this point, the bridge builder entered the room, looked around, and declared loudly that the girly boy with long hair would be unable to protect him. Unfortunately, Naruto's temper was already frayed, and he unleashed a barrage of lightning bolts, fireballs, a few blades of wind, and whips of water on the man. He would have continued with large chunks of earth next, but the man recovered from the shock of the girly boy causing utter destruction to the wall surrounding him. As Naruto wasn't going to kill him yet he really wanted this mission. Damn it. And not even a stupid old man was going to sabotage it. Sasuke was ruminating. He desired Naruto's ability to kill Itachi. His thoughts turned that into a mantra, as it accounted for roughly 80% of his thought processes. The remaining 20% was equal parts duck-ass hairstyle, hating fangirls, not training because I am a Uchiha, and Uchiha arrogance. Sekiro was terrified of the boy's temper, not wanting to aggravate him further because the techniques he was using would completely ruin her hair. How was she going to seduce Sasuke-kun if her hair wasn't perfect? And Naruto has such beautiful natural hair. Kakashi was staring at the blonde with malice, vowing to kill his student in an unfortunate accident. He was confident that something would happen on this mission to kill the boy, and allow him to train the Uchiha in peace.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.